"Let's make it official," my mom said, lifting her champagne flute at her own birthday dinner. "She's no longer family." She didn't say my name. She didn't have to. Every face swung toward me the way sunflowers tilt toward heat. I didn't argue. I smiled. Because at 9 a.m. the next morning, in a walnut-paneled conference room with a view of downtown Atlanta, my grandmother's will would be read. And my mom was about to learn what no longer family looks like when the estate plan has a spine. I'm Naomi Benton, 31, high school English teacher, reasonably good at comma splices and very good at pretending rude things don't land. I rent a small apartment in Decatur with a balcony big enough for a chair and 2 tomato plants that refuse to give up. I don't own furniture that matches. I do own a file bin labeled receipts, which is the closest thing I have to religion though. My mom, Darlene, likes optics, white tablecloths, curated narratives, the camera on her good side. She owns a boutique staging business that can make any rental look like hope. She can make any sentence sound generous while removing the part that might cost her. My grandmother, Ruth Benton, did not like optics. She liked gardens and crossword, puzzles and the word enough. She raised me more than anyone after my father left, and my mother discovered that marketing compliments pay better than bedtime stories. When I got my teaching license, Grand Ruth, never Grandma, brought me a Sharpie set and said, "Write your boundaries in ink." In May, Grand Ruth's heart failed the way old houses fail, quietly at first, then all at once. She died at 82 with her hands folded like a problem solved. I got the call during third period. I told my students to read silently and stepped into the hallway and made a sound I wouldn't recognize as mine if I heard it on a recording. My mother used the funeral to curate sympathy. She wore black like a costume and quoted poems no one had assigned her to read. She also started staying full-time in Grand Ruth's house to keep it from feeling empty. Even though she had a townhome across the city, she told anyone who would listen that she would steward the family home the way she stewards couches. Meanwhile, a polite attorney named Mr. Whitaker scheduled a will reading for the week after my mom's 58th birthday. My mother moved the dinner to a nicer restaurant and turned it into an event. She invited my aunts and uncles, 2 of her staging friends, a new boyfriend named Craig, and expensive shoes. And exactly 1 daughter dashed me to the dining room at Magnolia. House has velvet chairs and waiters who glide like they're wearing wheels. My mom arrived early to arrange menus and light her own candles from a monogram matchbox she pulled from her bag. When I walked in, she air-kissed the space near my cheek and gestured at the seat farthest from hers. Dinner moved along under its own momentum. Crab cakes, compliments, curated toasts. Mom recapped her pick year in the voice she uses for Facebook Live expansion, new clients, a feature in a local magazine that mostly featured her neckline. She skimmed past Ruth's death as if it were a road bump she'd navigated with grace. Then she lifted her glass. "Before cake," she said, smiling toward the center of the table like a church lady who's about to start a war, a small housekeeping matter. "Family matters." My stomach moved toward my shoes. She had put on her announcement voice. "Some people here," she said, eyes pointed like theater lights, "have chosen to make unkind decisions. To those people, I say, you can't opt in and out of family when it suits you. So, for clarity, from this moment, I consider anyone who disrespects me no longer family." Glasses shifted. A fork clinked against a plate. My Aunt Janet stared at her napkin as if it might contain shelter. Craig looked around like someone had started a flash mob. I felt every eye, every nerve. I smiled, the way you smile when someone does a magic trick badly and you're trying to be polite. "To no longer family," my mother said, lifting her flute as if she'd coined a toast that would outlive her. Craig, poor man, clinked. I took a sip of water, set my glass down, and said, "Okay." Not angry, not pleading, just okay. Okay. She repeated, incredulous. Yes, I said. You have a right to define your family. I glanced at my aunt. So do the rest of us. My mother's mouth pinched. Don't be dramatic, Naomi. I'm not, I said. I'm agreeing. Also, your cake is going to melt. The server arrived with a confection that looked like architecture. We sang a quick, disorganized happy birthday that sounded like a team trying to finish a game in the rain. My mother made a show of blowing out 3 candles, each of which represented a thing she loved out loud. Success, beauty, loyalty. I thought about how my grandmother used to make a wish and never tell anyone what it was as. We cut cake. My phone buzzed with a text from Aunt Janet under the table. Are you okay? I typed that. Perfect. Tomorrow will be fun. She sent a question mark. I didn't reply. Sometimes joy is not having to explain. Mr. Whitaker's office smelled like old books and polished wood. A wall of windows looked out at oaks that could answer questions if people bothered to ask trees for advice. My mother arrived in cream and pearls with Craig in her slipstream. My Aunt Janet and Uncle Russell came early and sat on the couch like kids waiting outside the principal's office. I wore my school clothes because I had a teacher work day after this, and also because the outfit in which a person witnesses justice should not become a costume you only wear once. Mr. Whitaker greeted us with the calm of a man who knows this. Room has seen every possible version of human performance, and that the paper always wins. He opened a thick file with blue tabs and said, As you know, Ms. Ruth Benton executed a will and irrevocable trust, most recently updated 14 months ago. I will read the dispositive provisions and her letter of instruction. He began with the small bequests, $10,000 to her church's food pantry, $5,000 to the library's summer reading program, a small scholarship fund in her sister's name for women over 40 returning to school. My mother bounced her foot impatiently, like she was waiting for her name to be called at a raffle. To my daughter, Darlene Benton, Mr. Whitaker read, My pearl earrings, the second best set, not the good ones, with love. And the set of staging photos I know you like because you keep taking them from my coffee table. Aunt Janet snorted into her tissue as if she wasn't supposed to have lungs. In court. My mother flushed. Is this a joke? She asked. Mr. Whitaker did not laugh. To my niece, Janet Price, 10% of my residuary estate. To my nephew, Russell Price, 10%. He glanced up. To my granddaughter, Naomi Benton, the remainder. The remainder, my mother repeated, like a person hearing a word in a language she had always pretended to speak. What does that mean? It means everything else, Mr. Whitaker said. The house at 224 Beresford, the investment. Accounts, the cash accounts, personal property not otherwise bequeathed, and all trust property. Miss Benton also named Naomi the successor trustee. Craig's chair tilted back down onto 4 legs. My mother's face performed 4 expressions in 11 seconds. Confusion, amusement, anger, calculation. Anger won. This is absurd, she said. Naomi is a child. I'm 31. I said. She's unmarried, my mother said, as if that settled a category. Not a legal disqualifier, Mr. Whitaker said mildly. She's barely scraping by, my mother said. She rents. She doesn't know how to handle. The house needs. The market. Words failed her the way brakes fail on a hill. Ruth knew the plan, she said finally, holding onto the word like a lifeline. I told her I'd manage the house for the family. Mr. Whitaker turned to a tab. Miss Benton anticipated that. She wrote a letter to be read after the will. He unfolded a page and began. Darlene, he read, you are my daughter and I love you. You're also not the person to manage a house when a paint color is the only thing you want to talk about. I am leaving the house to Naomi because she shows up. She also knows how to say no to me, which I count as a qualification. This is not a punishment for you. It is a reward for her. He continued, if you are tempted to contest, don't. I included a no contest clause. If you file a contest without probable cause, you forfeit your gifts. That includes the $25,000 I set aside in a separate account for you, which you will otherwise receive within 30 days. If you respect my wishes, take the money, buy yourself something practical, and be kind to the girl who kept me company. When you were busy, my mother's mouth worked like a fish discovering fresh water is a myth. She manipulated her, she said, pointing at me as if I were an effect she could undo by naming the cause. Ruth was vulnerable. She passed a capacity exam 2 weeks before the update, Mr. Whitaker said. 2 physicians will attest. He tapped another tab. And there is 1 additional provision regarding the house. Miss Benton granted. You, Darlene, a temporary license to occupy while she was alive to keep her company. That license terminated at her death. The successor trustee, Naomi, has the authority to ask any non-owner occupant to vacate with 30 days' notice. Aunt. Janet's hand found mine like we were girls again. My mother's color rose like a storm crawling up a map. You're going to kick me out of my mother's house, she said softly. At my age, I'm going to honor her will, I said evenly. You can go back to your townhome. You rented it out on Airbnb, but you didn't sell it. How? Do you know that? She asked, blinking. Receipts, I said, because sometimes a single word is a small mercy and a quiet burn. The next hour was every family holiday I'd ever survived. Except now, allow your kept time, and the outcome had a statute behind it. My mother cycled through 5 strategies. Bargain. I'll manage the house while Naomi finishes the school year. Then we'll revisit. Threaten. I'll contest. Guilt. Your grandmother wanted us together. Reputation. How will this look? Desperation. I don't have anywhere to go. Mr. Whitaker answered the legal parts. I answered the human ones. Bargain. No, I said. I can hire a property manager if I need one. Threaten. The no contest clause is clear, Mr. Whitaker said, sliding the page across the table. You would forfeit your bequest. Guilt. Grand Ruth wanted boundaries, I said. She wrote me letters about them. Reputation. You can tell any story you want, I said. I will not add to it. Desperation. Your townhome is empty next week, I said. You posted the blackout dates in your listing. You have a place. Her eyes flashed. You stalk me? I watched the pages that involve my name, I said. You listed yourself as co-host of the house you didn't own. Craig put a hand on her arm. Darlene, he said, cautious. Maybe we take the money, fix up the townhome, rebrand. We, she said, turning the word like a knife. We? He withdrew his hand up. Mr. Whitaker handed me a form. As trustee, you can issue license termination and set a move-out date, he said. We recommend 30 days with the option to extend once if cooperation is complete and respectful. I'll do it, I said, and my voice sounded like someone who could sign their own name without their hand shaking. I gave my mother 35 days. I gave her a list of what belonged to her, clothes, staging photos, the second best pearls, and what belonged to the estate, furniture, art, the garden she had not watered. I offered movers for 4 hours and a month of storage. I told her, in writing, no Airbnb, no inviting friends to see the place one last time, no removing fixtures, no yelling at the hydrangeas. She texted a paragraph that began with, how could you, and ended with, you'll regret this. I printed it for the receipts bin and did not reply. Aunt Janet texted, proud of you, with a heart emoji and a photo of the good pearls, which Ruth had left to me with a note. Where to interviews and ridiculous dinners. I asked my principal for 3 personal days to handle legal and logistics. I was surprised by how fast she said, "Take them." I hired a locksmith to rekey after the move out. I called the utilities to transfer. I changed the alarm code to the day of Ruth's graduation from nursing school because that was a date my mother didn't know. The hardest part wasn't the logistics. It was going into a house that still smelled like my grandmother and deciding where to put the absinthe. The kitchen table had rings where coffee had sat, while crosswords went from blank to victory. Her reading chair had a dent that made me want to slide into it and wait for her to say, "Now tell me everything from the beginning, no adjectives." Her bedroom held a jewelry box with a letter she'd written me on top. "Dear kiddo, if you're reading this, it means I'm not there to say it. Good. It'll make you use your spine." I cried in every hall and then opened windows so the house could meet me new. Move-out day came. My mother directed movers in a silk blouse. In anger, she held up items as if to ask the universe a question. This. And the universe, whispering through the trust document, said no, except where it said yes. When she tried to unplug the antique lamp Ruth had bought in 1972, I said, "That stays." When she reached for the oil painting of the Charleston battery, I said, "That stays." When she tried to open a drawer in the hall table labeled letters, I said, "I'll give you copies of any you wrote." She turned on me with a face I knew from childhood, the one that says, "Pay attention to my wound," or "I'll teach you to." "You are cruel," she said. "I am firm," I said. "Cruel would be telling you this in front of a party." She laughed. Once, without joy. "You think you won." "I think I'm doing what she asked," I said at the end of the day. A small pile of boxes sat on the porch, labeled with her name. The movers loaded them gently into a rented van. Craig stood by the driver's side with his hands in his pockets, like a man considering a map. My mother got in without looking back. For a second, I wanted to run after her like a little girl in a movie who hasn't learned that some scenes end because they have to. Instead, I locked the door. The next week, I moved into Ruth's house with 3 suitcases and a single print of a poem by Lucille Clifton that says, "Won't you celebrate with me?" I slept on the guest bed because the primary room felt too formal. For my grief, I made coffee and drank it at the kitchen table without coasters like a small act of rebellion. I walked the yard in the evening and introduced myself to my grandmother's plants. "I'm here," I told the gardenia. "I'll do my best. I know I won't be her." As trustee, I had work to do. I met with Mr. Whitaker to liquidate the accounts that needed liquidating and to fund the trust for repairs and taxes. I hired a CPA. I changed the insurance to my name and added a rider for emotional backbone. I also made decisions my grandmother would have approved of. I set up a small scholarship at my high school for seniors who worked jobs while maintaining decent grades. I wrote a check to the food pantry with a note, in memory of a woman who made soup that healed things. I paid off the last of my student loans and bought exactly 1 indulgence, a chair for the reading nook that looks like it was designed by someone who understands how a story asks you to sit. My mother sent 1 more letter through a lawyer. It wasn't a contest. It was a request for consideration, $50,000 for emotional distress, a life estate to allow her to stay in the house for appearances, a formal apology. Mr. Whitaker drafted a response that would win awards in the category of polite no. I offered her something else in my own letter. "I will cover 2 months of therapy. If you want it, with a provider of your choice, I will not discuss. Money again, I will be at holidays if there's no spectacle. I choose peace over performance." She didn't reply. Aunt Janet said she framed my letter in her mind. On the anniversary of the will reading, I hosted a small dinner. Aunt Janet, Uncle Russell and his quiet jokes, my friend Kira from school, and Mr. Whitaker's wife, who turned out to be in English. Teacher who loves Lucille Clifton too. We ate lemon chicken and a pie I almost burned because I stopped being scared of fire when I realized stoves are not metaphors. We told Ruth stories. We said her name like it wasn't a ghost. We lifted glasses and I said, to boundaries in blue ink. After dessert, I sat on the porch and looked down Beresford Street, where kids on bikes invented games and dogs invented excuses. I thought about the moment at dinner when my mother made a toast that cut me out and how it didn't cut me at all. It glanced off something I'd been building for years, a sense that family is not a mandate. It's a membership renewed by behavior. The next morning, I taught my seniors The Lottery by Shirley Jackson and asked them what traditions deserve to end. A girl in the second row said, the one where we pretend hurting someone is part of love. I wrote it on the board and didn't say out loud that a teenager had just summarized my year. A month later, my mother posted a photo on social media of her townhome staged to perfection. Caption, new beginnings. The comments were, a performance, but the rent was real. She didn't tag me. I pressed the little heart anyway, because sometimes generosity is free and you get to decide where to spend it. I still hear her toast sometimes when I wash dishes. She's no longer family. It lands differently now. It sounds like someone talking to a mirror and hoping the mirror changes. It sounds like a woman using a microphone to convince herself she's a crowd. When people ask me if it felt good to win, I tell them it felt like paperwork and quiet. It felt like honoring a woman who called herself Ruth because it was her name and because she believed we all owed each other a certain kind of kindness. You can put in a casserole dish or a trust. If someone tells you in public that you're no longer family, consider the relief in taking them at their word. Smile. Let the will be read. Let the paper tell the story of who showed up. Then go home, whatever home means for you, and make coffee in a cup that feels like yours. When someone uses a toast to cut you out, don't argue. Let the document speak. Boundaries written in blue ink outlast speeches. The cleanest. Revenge isn't a clapback. It's a will that says you were chosen and a life that acts like it.